Imagine you find out a serial killer in your city has already murdered 11 people. You call the FBI, and they say, "We know. We've always known, and we're not going to do anything about it." This is not a movie script. This actually happened. In Boston, Massachusetts, one of America's most iconic cities, a city of universities, history, and American pride, and underneath all of that, one of the most shameful cover-ups in FBI history. The most terrifying part, the killer wasn't just walking free. He was working for the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the agency sworn to protect American citizens, spent years covering for a man who was murdering those same citizens. And when the truth finally came out, nobody apologized, nobody took responsibility, the system just kept going. Today I'm going to tell you the story of Whitey Bulger, the gangster the FBI made untouchable. James Bulger grew up in one of Boston's toughest neighborhoods, South Boston. Everyone called it Saudi. Working class families, mostly Irish. Everybody knew everybody. These were tight-knit streets where loyalty meant everything, where you didn't talk to strangers and you definitely didn't talk to cops. By his teenage years, Bulger was already a stealing, running with the wrong crowd, getting into fights. The streets raised him in ways his family couldn't control. At 26, bank robbery, federal prison. But prison didn't break him. It educated him. He studied the criminals around him. He learned who was powerful, who was weak, and most importantly, he learned how to never get caught again. After his release, Bulger started building a criminal empire across Boston. Drugs, extortion, murder. By the 1970s, he was one of the most powerful gangsters in all of New England. He controlled the streets. He controlled the money. And soon, he would control something even more dangerous. Information. Neighbors actually called him a Robin Hood figure. He handed out money to local families, helped people in the neighborhood, fixed problems, settled disputes. People respected him. Some even loved him. Nobody knew how much blood was on his hands. Or maybe they just didn't want to know. That's the thing about monsters. The scariest ones don't look like monsters at all. In 1975, something happened that changed everything. FBI agent John Connolly grew up in the same neighborhood as Bulger. Same streets, same schools, same struggling Irish families. They knew each other as kids. And the childhood bond would go on to corrupt an entire federal agency. Connolly offered Bulger a deal. Become our informant, give us information on your rivals, and we'll look the other way on your operation. It sounded simple. It was anything but. Bulger agreed. And what followed became one of the most corrupt partnerships in the history of American law enforcement. A partnership that would cost innocent people their lives. Bulger fed the FBI information on the Italian mob, his competition. The FBI reported successes to Washington. Careers advanced. Awards were handed out. Everyone looked good on paper. And meanwhile, behind closed doors, Bulger kept killing, kept extorting, kept dealing drugs, kept expanding his empire while federal agents looked the other way. Other FBI agents started noticing something was wrong. Tips would disappear, raids would come up empty, suspects would vanish hours before arrest, but every time someone raised a concern, it went nowhere. And every time Boston police or other agents got too close, Connolly tipped him off. A phone call, a warning, Bulger would simply vanish. And sometimes the people looking for him would vanish too. Here's what the FBI knew and deliberately covered up. Bulger personally participated in at least 11 murders. His victims included women, innocent people. One young woman was strangled simply because she knew too much. She had heard things she wasn't supposed to hear, and that was enough to sign her death warrant. Her name was Deborah Davis. She was 26 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. Her family waited decades for answers. But here's the most disturbing part of this entire story. The FBI was actively leaking the names of their own informants to Bulger, people who had decided to cooperate with authorities, brave people who trusted the system to protect them, who believed that if they did the right thing, the government would keep them safe. They were found dead, one by one. The very system that was supposed to shield them had essentially handed their names to a killer. The FBI didn't just fail these people, they betrayed them. In 1994, someone tipped off Bulger that his arrest was coming. Federal indictment, his name was on it. It was over that someone was Connolly. Again, Bulger disappeared for 16 years. The FBI placed him on their most wanted list, right next to Osama bin Laden. Think about that for a second. The same list, a $2 million reward for information on his whereabouts. And still, 16 years of silence, he was hiding in plain sight. No disguise, no underground bunker, no secret identity. Just an old man with a fake name and decades of FBI training on how to avoid being caught. They found him by accident in 2011 in Santa Monica, California. He was 81 years old, living in a regular apartment building with his longtime girlfriend, going to the grocery store, watching TV, living like any other retired old man. His neighbors were completely stunned. They described him as a kind, quiet gentleman. Always said hello in the hallway. Nobody had any idea they were living next door to one of America's most wanted criminals. Bulger received 2 life sentences plus 5 years. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, people who had waited decades for this moment. In 2018, Bulger was killed in prison, beaten to death by fellow inmates just hours after arriving at a new facility. He was 89 years old. Connolly got 40 years for second-degree murder. He died in prison in 2021. But here's the question that still hangs in the air. How many more stories like this will we never find out about? How many Connollys are still out there? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. This wasn't a mistake. Mistakes happen once. This went on for nearly 2 decades. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. The FBI never officially apologized to the victims' families, not once. The U.S. government was eventually forced to pay out over $100 million in compensation to the families of those murdered. Taxpayer money, your money. The system failed. Innocent people died. And the people at the top who made those decisions, the ones who approved the informant relationship, who looked the other way, who let it continue for years, none of them went to prison. The man who pulled the trigger got life in prison. The men who handed him the gun, protected him, and covered his tracks, most of them retired with full government pensions. If that makes you angry, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think about this. And if you want more stories like this, stories the system would rather keep buried, hit subscribe, because we're just getting started.